Welcome. I'm really excited about today's video. I'm going to be talking about how to develop taper in bonsai trunks, but I'm also going to be showing you practical examples of how I do this. I've got together several different species of trees, including field maple, beech, hornbeam, hawthorn. I'm going to be going through these trees and actually chopping the trunks and showing you how I'm going to develop taper for the future. So let's get stuck in. I'll start off with this hornbeam. When we're talking about developing taper, for those who don't know, it's the way a tree goes from thick to thin as it goes to the top. And one of the main ways that we achieve this is by cutting the trunk and allowing the new branch to become the new top of the tree. So I wired this hornbeam and I've got some nice movement in it. I think it's got a good start, but from here to here it's very straight and there's minimal taper. So at some point along here I would like to chop it and take this into one of these. So I'll just start at the top. So I'm not sure if that's where I'm going to finish with it, but that's my initial cut. This will now become the top of the tree, and actually it does taper quite nicely to this point. So my big decision, I don't think I can make this bottom branch the new leader, but I could possibly cut it to there. So that's my decision at the moment, is do I cut it to there or do I leave it there? And I actually quite like this. I think it works quite well, but I don't really like this heavy branch here. So I am going to go further. A lot of people are frightened of this kind of cut because they think the tree's disappearing. Where's it going? You know, you had a few minutes ago you had a nice tree and now it's gone almost. But this is an absolutely necessary part of creating taper within this tree. I don't need to wire this, although possibly a thin piece of wire might help. What I do need to do is put some wound sealant on the cut, and that's just to protect that end from disease getting in. I think most people would agree that that tree looked significantly better before I cut it as a tree, and that's the issue. I don't want to grow a tree, I want to create a bonsai in the future. So I think that cut was absolutely necessary. And by cutting it now, the cut's fairly small, it'll heal over in a year or two very easily, and there won't be a big nasty chop mark, which is quite an important thing. My next tree is an ash, and you can see here that I've previously cut off the main leader and allowed the branch to grow. This branch, however, is pretty much as thick as the trunk, so there's no real taper there. So it's kind of decision time. What do I do with this? Ash are not good for bonsai, and if I leave that to grow, it's just going to become big and unwieldy. For me, I think the answer is to cut it right back here. So that's what I'm going to do. It might seem drastic, but without that cut, this will never be anything worth working with. Ash are not a great species for bonsai, but at least by doing this now, I'm giving it a chance to develop some taper, and I think that's much better. It would be almost impossible for me to do a video like this without working on a hawthorn, and this is a good example because this is one that's already been chopped and I'm going to chop a second time. The decision on what to do with this tree is by no means cut and dry. When I pull these leaves away, you can see the cut that was made last year, and this branch up here was wired upwards. You can see some of the sort of minor marks from the wire, and already it's got some taper because of that. So having done that chop last year, I've got some nice movement into the tree. There is some taper beginning to happen. The problem is up here. I've now got two basically equally thick branches, and I need to select one to be the new leader. If I select the top one, this is going to be a very thick branch high up the tree. So the decision is really made for me that I have to chop the trunk here. I'll just take my hybrid cutters and take that off. I've just applied a piece of aluminium wire to this because this branch obviously is not in a good place, and if this is going to become the new leader, this wants to come up. This will also encourage this branch to thicken, and yeah, I think that works okay. One of the main things that we have to get used to doing this kind of work is the idea that the tree actually looks worse when we've done it. You know, it looked like quite a nice, good, healthy tree before. Now it's hacked back, but this is definitely going to be an improved tree, and already over the space of a chopstick we've gone from thick to medium to thin. That's taper. Got a bit of a weird tree here. This one's a field maple. I bought this from a garden centre as a bare root stock earlier this spring. When I got it home, I bought 3 of them. One of them is the video where I bent the trunk by doing the saw cuts. When I looked at this one, the roots were really weird, so I ended up planting it at a strange angle. I'll just bring you in a bit closer. As you can see, the trunk comes up. I planted it at this angle because of the roots, and I've wired all these branches. I didn't really know what to do with them, if I'm honest, so I just kind of pointed them up in the sky and thought I'll work on that later. So I need to get that wire off. I'm sure there are people looking at this thinking, oh, branches going upwards, nice canopy, nice healthy tree, leave it. But from here to here is incredibly boring and untree-like, and there's absolutely no way that this can stay in the design. So I'm taking that off to start with. That's certainly simplified things now, and it leaves me 2 options. I either take this into the new leader or this into the new leader. I don't see that being a realistic option for anything, so you know that's not part of it. So these are my 2 options, and I just think going from really thick to thin will be a far more interesting tree. And I don't know what you think. Let me know in the comments. What would you have done? Would you have gone for this, perhaps? Because there is the option of tilting this tree. But I've made my mind up. The decision is made. Off with the head. If you're wondering what's with the weird stump that I've left, all maples tend to die back. So you need to leave a stump for the tree to die back, and then I'll cut that off probably in 6 or 12 months. This is now the new leader, and hopefully this keeps growing. There's no way I'll cut any of this for at least 2 years, because this needs to thicken up, and then hopefully I get some fresh growth out of here at some point, and I can do another chop. And I think this could be an interesting tree 5, 6, 10 years time. That's how you've got to think with bonsai. You know, you've got to turn a lovely, nice, healthy tree into a weird thing like this. But this is part of the process. Next on the hit list is a nice beech. It was one of the first trees I collected this. It's got some quite nice movement at the base, and it goes up. It's got some fairly decent branching, and it's got the same problem. For me, there's not enough taper, so I've got to do a cut, and I think I also have to take a look at the cutting back some of the branches as well. I must have removed the largest branch from the very base of the tree early last year, which is part of the reason it's got this interesting shape at the base, and that's healing up nicely, callousing over. Now what do we do up here? We've got a small branch there, which I like. Got two thickish branches, which are okay. I don't mind these. I quite like this thin branch. The problem is the taper doesn't really continue up here, so I'm thinking that this can be the new leader. Now, I have previously done a cut around the back here. That's callousing over nicely. It's almost healed. However, in hindsight, it's just too long. So it's time to go in and remove that top section. A lot of the other trees have looked worse after I've worked on them. But I think this is one that looks better. This is a much better leader. It's got good taper in it, and I think this is developing into quite a nice potential bonsai. Next on the chop list is a hazel. It's got quite an interesting base with a few suckers. First thing, I'm going to take those suckers out. What's that? I sound like Mr. T. I'm going to take those suckers out, fool. As I say, first thing, get rid of these suckers at the bottom so that I can see what's going on down here. What you can see here is last year's chop. So I've done a chop, I turned a side branch into the new leader to develop taper, but I've made a fundamental error. And my error is I've started it too high up the tree. So there's all this distance here with no taper, and then taper begins, and that's just no good. It doesn't work, it doesn't look good. So I've got a choice now of either of these two to turn into the new leader, and this one just seems like a much stronger, healthier shoot. So it'll be a bit of a push for me cutters this, but let's see if I can cut that out off in one. There we go. That's come off quite nicely, that. I'll just obviously apply some cut paste to that wound to assist it healing over. Quite generous with it. And again, there we go. I'm repairing the mistake of last year when I didn't really know any better. This is a great example of a beginner mistake. Having watched all these previous chops now, you should be able to know what the mistake is. Especially when I tell you that I did my chop last year here. It's way too high, way too high. You know, it's just like some long spindly thing. It's never going to be an interesting literati style unless I cut it here and perhaps turn this into the new apex, and then I get the curve and I go for a literati. Now, as I just set the camera up, I was going to do a full chop and just chop it right down to here. But having said literati, it kind of works in that S shape. So I've had a rethink, and that's what I'm going to do. I do think that could make a really interesting new apex. So let's take this off. Well, I quite like how that's turned out. It's got a nice elegance to it, and I think it works in that kind of literati style. As this thickens up, the wound hopefully heals over, and maybe I get some other bits of branches. I don't know, but I think there's a future for this tree now, having made that cut. This is the last tree of them all. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've picked up some ideas and possibly become a little bit braver, because I see sometimes on Facebook and in different groups, and I see trees, and even on other YouTube videos, I think, chop it, cut it, you know, get it back, get it under control. And so get out there, get your secateurs or your concave cutters and get it chopped back. And then when you look at it in a couple of years' time, you'll know you made the right decision. So have a great day, and I'll see you soon.